Hi, and welcome back to our online lecture here on India. We looked at the geography of the Indian subculture in part one, and here in part two, we're going to focus on the early civilization. And when we look at this next slide, this kind of gives you an idea of where this is all located. This here is the Indus River, and it's sometimes called the Indus River Valley Civilization. So we're going to call it that, but we might also call it the Harappan Civilization, named after the city of Harappa that was found there. A lot of really cool stuff has been found in this region. Again, you have to remember the language has not been deciphered yet. We do not know what their written language says, so we have to go purely off of the artifacts that have been found in this region. And that can give us a lot of information, but it also just makes us wonder what else we could learn from the written language that has not been translated yet. So let's talk about the civilization that emerges on the Indus. Historians have yet to decipher the Indus system of writing, and I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times now, but it's so frustrating because it would be really, really interesting. I think it would open up all sorts of new information once we have it that could tell us some great stuff about these people. So it's still unclear when the civilization began in India, but evidence shows that people were using domesticated goats and sheep around the year 7000 BC. So you're going back about almost 10,000 years, 9,015. So what that tells us is the people were living there at that time. Were they living before that? Probably, but we don't have evidence that proves that either way. So we know there have been people here for at least 9,000 years. The Indus Valley Civilization is sometimes called the Harappan Civilization because of many archaeological discoveries that were made there. And I showed you this on the previous map, that city of Harappa. So that's where that name comes from. So when we talk about the Indus River Valley Civilization and the Harappan Civilization, I'm talking about the same group of people. One of the things that really set them apart from all of the ancient civilizations that we're going to study, maybe save for a little bit of the Romans and beyond, was their city planning. Their city planning is one of their most remarkable achievements. City planning is a difficult thing to do, especially when you're just a culture who grows from a farming society maybe to a significant civilization. You don't think too far in advance to try to start planning your city, but the people here absolutely did that. And we know that because they used a grid system. Grid system, and I'll show you this on the map on one of the next slides, it was something that Mesopotamia never did, so it's unlike Mesopotamia's maze of winding streets, and we still see a lot of European cities from really advanced cultures that have winding roads and roads that don't seem to go straight in any direction, really narrow, not really planning ahead for any type of traffic. But here in the Indus Valley, there's grid. I mean, it's perpendicular lines, which really tells us that they were thinking and had somebody who was able to sort of plan for the future. Probably what's even more remarkable than that is their engineers used an advanced plumbing system that rivaled 19th century plumbing. Most civilizations did not have any type of running water at this point. Certainly the Egyptians and the Sumerians. Really, we won't see running water until the Romans with some of their fountains. And you didn't see any type of underground piping. So if you had any type of waste that you needed to get rid of, you put it in a bucket and you threw it out the window. People were doing that in London all the way up until the 1800s. But here we have evidence that shows that they had pipes running through their homes underground that could carry any type of wastewater away from the home. Didn't necessarily have running water, but these pipes were angled in such a way that if you put any waste in there and flushed it out with water, it would be carried away. So really, really pretty advanced for their time. We will not see that for hundreds and hundreds of years anywhere else. So this uniformity suggests that the people of the Indus Valley had a very strong central government that really dictated things and planned things and controlled how the people lived. So here's an image. This sort of shows you the perpendicular lines. You can kind of see it from left to right up here. This here would likely have been a street. This would have been some type of street or alley. So that shows you the grid system in a city called Mohenjo-Daro. That's pretty cool. In terms of the plumbing, this is an artist's recreation, but you can see pipes going in and out of the city here, which would have been more like channels, but it would have absolutely given people the ability to flush away waste that would have kept them cleaner and healthier than a lot of the other civilizations that didn't have something like this. So that's really remarkable. Let's talk a little bit about their culture and who they were. We're looking at their housing separations. It suggests that the divisions in society were not great. What I mean by that is you don't see really big mansions and tiny little shacks. They seem to be relatively the same size, so everybody must have been sort of on the same economic standing as one another. Nobody had a lot more wealth than the next person. They had a lot of artifacts that were found, so artifacts of toys and clay pots suggest a relatively prosperous society. If you have time to carve and create these things, that must mean you have some type of free time or some type of artisan who can create them, therefore can sell them and make a living off of that. So having those suggests a lot to us. This one's kind of cool, though. We did not find a lot of weapons. In fact, very few weapons at all have been found. So a few items of warfare found, suggesting that conflict was limited. And that doesn't really surprise us if you really look at the map of India and go, well, at least they were cut off from the rest of the world. They wouldn't have had a lot of threat from outside armies or invading civilization. Now, certainly doesn't mean that they couldn't have fought amongst each other, but we don't find the weapons that prove that. So it must have been a relatively peaceful society. We know animals were very important. For example, you're going to see, I know elephants matter, and I'll show you a couple of images here as we go on to the next slide. Historians believe that the Harappan civilization used a theocracy, and this might have an early connection to Hinduism. They weren't Hindus yet, but they were moving in that direction. So we think the theocracy, just like in Egypt, was involved. They didn't have pharaohs, but religion would have been a very integral part of their government. So here's what I'm talking about. You can kind of see horses. There's a water buffalo. We know that animals were very important in their culture, and so you can see that here in some of the carvings and artifacts that were found here. Now, the Indus Valley culture ends. The people of India are not direct descendants of these people from the Indus River Valley, so something had to happen. So evidence found in the 1970s suggests that a shift in tectonic plates may have caused earthquakes, flooding, and even caused the Indus to change course. Of course, when you have any of those natural disasters, it can ruin homes, it can ruin cities, it can ruin civilizations if it's bad enough. So it's possible that the people may have had to move out or leave due to environmental catastrophe. Some cities survived the disasters, but other cities' food supplies were affected. And when your food supply is affected, you either stay and die or you move and survive. And so we assume a lot of people moved on to try to find food and a better place to live. But later, as you can see from this little map that's in front of you, a group of people called the Aryans would sweep in the area and take control. They came from the Caucasus regions of Europe and Asia here and came south and settled in India. So the descendants there of India today are not descendants of the Indus Valley, but more descendants of the Aryans that swept in and took control. So that might have also signaled the end of the Indus River Valley culture when the Aryans showed up. So that brings us to the end. We've got enough information now that we can answer our two questions, describe the geography of the Indian subcontinent, and trace the development and significance of the civilization that developed in the Indus River Valley. Certainly for the geography, we're going to talk about the Indus and Ganges River. We're going to talk about the different mountain ranges, the Hindu Kush, the Karakoram, and the Himalayas. Certainly you're surrounded by water on all three sides. So you've got a lot to talk about there. Even with the Indo-Gangetic Plain, the monsoons, we can talk a lot about the geography. Number two, trace the development and significance of the civilization developed in the Indus River Valley. You're going to talk about the Harappan culture. You're going to talk about the grid system and the city planning and the plumbing system, the fact that we haven't deciphered their language yet. We talked a little bit about how they didn't seem to be much in terms of way of warriors because we didn't find a lot of weaponry. Housing and where they lived suggests that their divisions in society weren't that great. So we've got a lot that we can talk about there to talk about the significance of the Indus River Valley civilization. So gang, that's going to wrap it up for us here today. Hope you learned something. We'll talk to you next time.